welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
All right, good day, authors, book lovers, and storytellers. Welcome to another session here in Reader's Magnet's featured author of the hour. And we are very happy to let you know that today is our 7th day of our virtual book fair, the Festival of Storytellers Season 3. My name is Leah, and I am your host for today. And with me is one of the Reader's Magnet's featured author, and of course, one of our valuable author we have. And today, we are very honored to be given the chance to know him as an author, what inspired him to write this book, and of course, to tackle what this book is really all about. Let's all welcome our one and only Mr. Walter Clark Boutwell, author of the book Outland Exile, Exile's Escape, and Malila of the Scorch. Hello, Mr. Boutwell. Good day to you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing great as well. Thank you so much for asking, Mr. Boutwell. Yeah, here, you know what, Mr. Boutwell, I am very excited to have this discussion with you right now, especially knowing that your book is, I say that advocating for a specific cause and agenda. And hey, not just that. Because I have been hearing a lot of positive things about you coming from your one and only consultant, of course, Jessa. I know she's very excited and happy to see you on this platform right now. I mean, from the very beginning, she's very happy to really, really help you out towards reaching your goal as an author. And, you're exactly one of the reason why she's also striving so hard because of the dedication you also showed to her, especially when it comes to introducing your book to among as many people. So yes, why don't we start greeting Jessa, Mr. Boutwell? I know that she's also watching.
Oh,
Right.
oh, hello, Jessa.
Yes, hi Jessa. I know you're watching us now. So yeah, this is the moment that we've been waiting for. And of course, Mr. Boutwell, it's not just me, Jessa, Reader's Magnet family, who's very excited to, of course, to know about your book. So yep, let's get it on and let's start sharing the story behind your book. But before we do tackle your book, Mr. Boutwell, we wanted to know who really Mr. Clark Boutwell is.
Well, surprisingly, this is not my first gig. Writing is not my first gig. I've made a career out of doing intensive care medicine with newborn infants. So
Mm.
it'll be babies putting tubes in strange places. And I always say that they're the world's best patients because none of them drink, none of them smoke. They all want to get better, and there's no heavy lifting. So
Right.
I have been doing that both in the United States as well as overseas at mission hospitals on 4 continents. Um, and and that actually feeds into the origin story, if you will, of my writing. I had been writing for fun, and you have to understand that writing for a doctor is you've got to essentially throw off everything you learn, which nobody ever does anything in medicine. The patient is taken to the operating room and was draped and was, nothing, nobody ever does anything. So learning to write was trying to undo 50 years of writing medicine and learn how to write English again. But I thought this was going to be a small project, but it was based on being lectured to by a 10-year-old Ghanaian boy. He had, for some reason, sang from me the Ghanaian national anthem, which is in English, of course, because that's its national language. And I retaliated with the Star Spangled Banner. And while he was trying to recover, I mentioned offhandedly that it had been composed during a battle between England and America. And he went, England and America have been at war? I said, well, yes, actually twice. The first time being on War of Independence, and he does another double take, and he says, America hasn't always been, I said, well, no, we were a colony for 150 years. Come to think of it, both Ghana and the United States have been colonies of England. Ghana's never been a colony. Well, I'm pretty sure about that. I was there when it happened. That was 1958. I was 10 years old. And he said, no. Ghana has never been a colony. And I said, well, how come you speak English then? Ghana's an English-speaking country. So, I quit at that point, and tried to sort of understand how something to me is quite basic information is completely unknown. And this is a boy who lives with his grandfather. So, the information the grandfather certainly had never got transposed to the grandson. My thesis is that it has to do with the age of the country, the actual physical age of the country. At the end of the Second World War, Ghana, I was there working in a mission hospital, so I wasn't there just being a tourist. But the average age was like 45, and it's now 68. And the average, 45 to 60, life expectancy. Life expectancy was 45 to 68, which is 50% improvement. Surprisingly, the average age went from 30 something to the low 20s. And the answer to both those phenomena are the same thing. Better medicine, better nutrition, better transportation, Western intolerance to war. The world is literally getting older and younger. Babies don't die in the first year of life. Men aren't killing themselves as 20-year-olds. Old men aren't dying of heart attacks in their 40s. You have an extended age. And so I wondered, what would this look like in the United States? What if we had one young country and one old country? So the setup for Outland Exile was to try and figure out a way to create that, and then to pick up one middle-aged individual, she's 17, because her country only expects people to be alive and active and part of the country until they're 40, and drops her into the middle of the other country where everybody expects to live to be 170 and part of the society for the entire time. And she's immediately captured by another middle-aged individual who's 76. So they differ in age by 60 years, but they're both middle-aged. And so the first book is very much, and that's Outland Exile. The first book is very much Malila's story, Malila Ivanova True, and the name has a reason for being that way. And she is the Outland Exile. You're in her head most of the book, and it's in a lot of ways her political coming of age. She realizes her country is an illusion, and that's when she's captured. The first half of the book is her trying to kill her captor, Jesse Johnstone, and him trying not to kill her, although she definitely deserves it. So that sets up the tension when she is then recaptured, and she's now seeing her country as the illusion that it really is. The unity where her home country is what she thought in utopia. There's free healthcare. There's computerless surfing of a nationwide core computer. There's retirement of 40. And there are recreational drugs at very reasonable prices for some reason. So she comes back and starts seeing the illusions that she never saw before because she's met Jesse, who is very authentic. The second book is Exile's Escape. And I would point out that the apostrophe is at the end of S. So these are multiple exiles. And Jesse is one of the exiles. And you get much more into the story of Jesse during the second book. Malila's trying to get out of her utopia. Jesse is trying to find Malila. And they both succeed and fail simultaneously. You meet more of various other characters that figure strongly in the third book, including Will Butler, who is a spy, and Hecate Jones, who is a friend of Malila's. Another big component to the story is computer entities. We think of the computer as being, this marvelous thing, but in reality, it's very two-dimensional. You go to an address, you either get in or you get out. You make this decision. I mean, you could lay it out on a two-dimensional board very easily. What if you had 3 dimensions? What if you could look at the whole internet from above? And I imagine that there are computer entities that can do that. So they can move around and sort of understand what's happening. And so you meet several of these computer entities that finally make peace with themselves. So that's the second book. And the third book is Malila of the Scorch. So one of the things I had to invent for this scenario to work was that I had to keep these two countries apart for a good extended period of time, and that was 70 years. And that I did that with the invention of the Scorch, which are changed plants that do not allow anybody to go back and forth, with the exception of people who grew up in them, like Jesse. And Malila becomes a familiar of one of them and presents herself as, Malila, I'm the messenger of the Scorch. War is coming. We know this. Because of the characters involved, Um, and so this is backplayed. This is all worked out in a background of war coming more and more and more and more likely, and what's going to happen if there is war before there is a treaty and all that sort of thing. And then the two of them, are fall on two different sides of a question, and eventually unite and come to an understanding. Both Jesse with Malila and Jesse with the Scorch, which has been a friend enemy since he was a kid.
Right. You know what, Mr. Boutwell, it's very interesting. This achievement of yours, from that being, just a normal person, a volunteer physician. Wow. See, this is actually one of the reason why we are really amazed in your creation, Mr. Boutwell. I mean, from starting doing things on your own, discovering on your own, like, let's say, discovering what you want to do, not just for yourself but towards helping people. I really like the idea of someone who's advocating an agenda that would lead people to become as an outstanding individual, to also, let's say, step up, do good things for others in the community, which also provides a natural sense of accomplishment. And for this book, it's very interesting, Mr. Boutwell, that on your first book it talks about a young lady that's trying to fight for the brutal unity system. Wow, a story of those disdained by the unity governing forces. That's interesting. I really love the concept of your book, Mr. Boutwell. Right. And you know what, Mr. Boutwell, we
Well,
are very
she
curious
starts
as
out as a
well.
real true believer.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. And we are very curious as
Yeah, she
well
starts
to
out as a
know.
real true believer.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And also, one of the things that we're very curious, Mr. Boutwell, to writing this book, are there any, let's say, surprising moment that you have discovered?
That's kind of unfair. I think that's some of the craft of writing, is keeping your reader somewhat on a back foot. I try to sort of surprise people. I imagined the basic story arc right at the beginning and wrote it all the way through. But
Mm,
having to facilitate this with other characters is kind of the fun part, and creating more subtexts and more characters, which is sort of fun all by itself. So there are
mhm.
lots of misdirection and kind of inside jokes, because as an author, I can do that.
Right. You know what? I like that, Mr. Boutwell. And, it's really captivating that this book was also created on what is really happening with our society right now. And hey, not just that, because it also talks about a real possibility of what might happen in the future. And the way I also understand your book, Mr. Boutwell, it's like a let's say a dystopian genre, right? Talks about society that is also characterized by some, let's say, a negative habits, war, environmental destructions, injustice act, where they're also facing a great suffering. Right now, we actually have a lot of viewers right now, Mr. Boutwell. And actually, I have a question coming from Alice. Hey, Alice. It says here that Alice said that impressive how you somehow relate your fiction books to your profession. It's very relatable, right?
It's almost Yeah, it's almost impossible not to. um, I Uh, I had to dumb down a lot of the medicine because I didn't want to sort of look, go into this interesting to me, but not interesting to the reader. And so I wrote a lot of that because I had to understand it myself, and then I took it out. This is what I call scaffolding. I write. I try to write 500 words a day and stop.
Mhm.
And a lot of the words that I write, because when you think about that, that's only a few months writing. Uh, um, but a lot of that is what I call scaffolding. It's built there in order to write the narrative that actually stays. And then you can, once you've built the edifice, you can take down the scaffolding. And so medicine was, I don't, this is not a medical textbook, and neither would I want it to be, and neither would you want it to be. This is very much, I don't think there's not a lot of science fiction in this book. There's like
Oh.
one or
Mhm.
two things. It's mostly what one would call hard science fiction, but I'm mostly putting it in the future so that I don't get people don't presume this is a commentary about the present. I want it to be a commentary about what's the nature of humankind, not
Mhm.
what's the nature of human politics today, which I think to be way out in left field, and it will get better with time, I hope. Um, if it doesn't, you know, um, 2052, which is when I say things are going to go bang, won't happen. It'll have happened already.
Right.
I see another question of what's the hardest scene to write?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Good
From
question. There were
Joan.
several hard scenes. Yes, I have a very hard time writing any of the scenes inside the Unity because it is, how do you remove all the effects of history and just leave illusion? You can't refer back to anything. You have to get rid of religion. You have to get rid of history. You have to get rid of the principles on which the nation is created. And you have to
Mhm.
rebuild in some sort of fashion. I found that very difficult. But probably the single most difficult in the first book, at least, was a love scene between Jesse,
Mhm.
who is 76, mind you, and Malila, who is 16 or 17
Whoa.
right there. Um, and, how do you make that? Um, they've come a long way. They've gone
Mhm.
through a lot of stuff. They know the worst. They've seen the worst of each other. They have seen, but in the end, Malila realizes that Jesse is, when she didn't know it, he was saving her life. Um, and when she's finally betrayed, he's saying, I'm here and I love you. Um, and that was difficult to walk that line. So I found that the most difficult.
Mm. Okay. That sounds really interesting, Mr. Boutwell. Creating that wonderful love story with all the, with all the gap, the ages, and yes, June, that's exactly the answer. That is the hardest scene that was created on this story by Mr. Boutwell. And from that moment writing this book, Mr. Boutwell, I know that you've been getting a lot of positive feedback coming from your readers. Let's just say, are there any, questions you had for yourself, asking if this is going to be a good story? Are there any doubts, key challenges? And I also like the courage. Where is it coming from? As well as the inspiration of really, pushing yourself, sharing this piece.
Um, uh, well, I'll give you my authentic answer is that I had this idea that I wanted to write out, but I could say that the idea is fairly simple. How does age change your politics? But when it came down to it, within 15 minutes of starting to write this book, I knew the two characters. I knew their ages. I knew their eye color. I knew their hair color. I knew how tall they were. They scampered up my arms and into my brain and lived there for 8 years, all rent free, until I wrote them out. So it wasn't a choice of mine um, to sort of go on. Is that I had to do that. These people were insisting that their story be written out, and I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to write itself out until midway through the books, midway through all the three books.
Right. And here we actually got some message coming from Alice. Malilla of the Scorch. Just curious how you come up with this
Well,
title
there's a
since
question. Malila of the Scorch.
uh-huh, right.
Just curious how you came up with this title, since Malila are an ethnic and linguistic group based in Mbele region of southwestern Tanzania. Just thought the title might be connected to this.
Right.
Um,
Mr.
I,
Boutwell.
I worked. I can't tell you. I worked months and months in Kenya, and I had a friend who in Rwanda who wound up in the Mbeya rather region, and talked about the Malila. And there's also it's but really the name came to me as just the name, and then I sort of back researched and said, yeah, you did know that name. It also has a connection with the Northwest Indians, meaning a salmon swimming upstream, which also seemed to be appropriate. But I plucked it out in the first 15 minutes of writing this from my subconscious, I presume, just for the euphony of the name.
Right. And we actually got something from JM. I would love to know if you ever experience writer's block. Whoa, this is very common, right? As your books have a lot of things going
Yeah.
on, and by your descriptive, a lot of meaningful pieces being put together as the story gets into trilogy. Yeah. What can you say about that, Mr. Boutwell?
Good
Writer's
point.
block.
That's
Mm-hmm.
excellent point. And I would have said no until recently. Um, I, several tricks for dealing with writer's block. Invent a new um, character.
Mm-hmm.
You may kill him off later. You may never mention him. Just invent him. Put flesh on him. Have him do something. Change the way you're writing. If you're writing on a computer, stop. Write on a pad and pencil. Dictate. Do anything that changes the way in which you translate ideas into the written word. Pick it up in the middle. Just go around and say, I'll pick it up here, and read the story from that point on, and see what needs to be done. In the last 2 years, I've had some real difficulty getting
Mm-hmm.
writers. To being able, my usual thing was get up, write 500 words a day, put it down. I'm having difficulty now, right? Because I 2 years ago this month learned that my wife of 43 years had left me without any warning. And the same day I learned I had stage 4 prostate cancer, which I, was a bit of a shock. I'm in remission. I'm moved out of a house I lived in 25 years. I'm in the process. I moved to Tennessee from Alabama. I'm living in a small cabin up in the hills of eastern Tennessee, and I'm planning on building a bigger cabin in the next year. So lots of things have changed, and I haven't come back to, uh, sort of center yet. And I'm hoping that when I do, I can start being more productive. I still write. I just can't seem to write every day. Even when I'm inventing new characters, even when I'm change how I write, even when I pick it up in an odd place and go from there.
Okay, so I must say, Mr. Boutwell, that those are the events that really led you into writing this book. And we also have a curious viewer from June. He mentioned, she or he, he says that hold on, it's gone. What inspired you to write this book? Was it during one of your travels?
Well, I think I mentioned that. That's what inspired me to write was the question of how does truth get dissolved inside a
Mm-hmm.
society. I thought everybody knew that the United States was, was cobbled together from a bunch of little states that just happened to be on the wrong side of an ocean away from England. Our revolution is very grubby. It just happened to be led by men who were uh, pretty impressive, um, and was fortunate. I mean, it was very fortunate that we were where we were, and people were willing to wait out the will of the English people. Um, so, I think I'm surprised people don't know that. I think it's something we
Mm-hmm.
need to tell people about. But answering that question for myself is what this book is all about.
Mm-hmm.
I also see the comment that evaporated. Is there a movie uh, that's similar to the trilogy you wrote? Gee, I hope not. um, I tried very hard not to follow in anybody's footsteps.
Right.
I think having between, a legitimate romance between a 17-year-old and a 76-year-old does set it apart somewhat. Um, Most of the people that I talked to said, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that," and so that was the challenge to make that not just realistic but reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they uh, the nature of a decidedly young country, brutally segregating itself from its past. That was very tough to write, but I needed to make it as fair as possible. I couldn't set up a straw man and say, this is how it's all going to go, and somebody said, "Nah, I don't think so." I needed to make it um, as believable and reasonable as possible. The middle of the country, you get much more feeling of continuity by design. You get no sense of continuity in the unity, although it describes itself as a utopia.
Okay, there you go, Elena. So that's the answer coming from Mr. Boutwell. And also, we got a question here coming from Brian. Are infidels some sort of character in your book?
Uh, what does infidel mean? It means those who
Let's
don't
start there.
believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, are there infidels? Yeah, there are dozens of them. There are the infidels of the unity who don't believe in human rights, don't believe that a Bill of Rights is reasonable. There are so Malila is an infidel. Jesse
Mm.
is considered an infidel, meaning more of an outsider because of his actions as a young man, which I won't get into. Um, there are infidels inside the structured states of America, which is the descendant nation from the United States. The United States gone, so the restructured states is where Jesse lives, and there are people out to get Jesse because they consider him an infidel, and they, of course, are also infidels,
Mm.
considering the nation in which they live, and they act to the detriment of the country. So, infidels are where you find them. Um, and I think that's what I was trying to say is that old men uh, are considered kind of in this country, at least, as kind
Mm-hmm.
of the Walking Dead. They walk and they talk and they do, but they don't count. Um, whereas when we talk about infidels, we sort of have a religious overtone to it, but it really means just not faithful. And there certainly are people that are not faithful, no matter what they are or whether they're in power or not.
Mm. Right. And uh-huh. Yes, and you know what, Mr. Boutwell, one of the greatest things I can say that you've done for this book, it is how you show to the readers, let's say, the importance of unity, because the connection is there, right? And I love that. Such a very powerful thing that could really help everyone to have that new perspective. Let's say a thorough understanding that will definitely bind people together. This book is really full of inspiration. Um, I really like the idea, like such a wonderful creation, the new journey of, let's say, of an open heart for welcoming, new possibilities to discover the power of, let's say, forgiveness, the love, the friendship, and unity. I just love it, Mr. Bowell. Right. It's very, wow,
Well,
amazing.
that's very much the second book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very much the second book. Is Malila initially takes the wrong message. She takes the message as being, "I've got to be a hard ass like Jesse if we're going to succeed."
Mm-hmm.
And Jesse is distinctly an hard ass. Nothing gets by him. Nothing thwarts him. He gets the job done.
Mm-hmm.
But Malila learned that the real message of Jesse was forgiveness,
Right.
which I think we could all use. I see
Mm-hmm.
another question about, is there going to be more? Well,
Uh-huh.
I mentioned I'm writing. What I'm writing is another trilogy, which I tentatively call The Silence and the Gods. And I took 3 books to tear apart the United States, or it was really pretty much torn apart by the time I got to it. So I'm not going to take any blame for it. The next 3 books are trying to, you know, how do we put it back together again? Is it puttable together again? Um, Terrible injustices have been done by Americans on Americans. Um, the the faith in America and the faith of Americans is atomized. It's fractured. And so, how do you bring that kind of disaster to a
Mm-hmm.
sort of low energy state where everybody's actually getting along?
Right.
And of course, that's very speculative, to say the least. There's not good evidence to say we can do that.
Mhm.
But this is my attempt to do that, to say, how can we take these horrible things and make them into a common family again? And
Mhm.
that's the trilogy I'm doing right now. I'm actually writing it in all 3 books at one time. It saves on continuity.
Right. And you know what, Mr. Boutwell, what really is very, captivating about your book is also your book is actually advocating a specific cause and agenda. I like how it serves like as an eye opener to really getting to know, people instead of building those walls, right? From a different cultivation, traditions, beliefs, let's say. I mean, I like the idea of having that understanding someone thoroughly that would really let everyone to, to make things better. That is wonderful. Yeah, Sister Batwell. And hey, we actually got something from Blue. Did your writing style change over time?
The short answer is I'm quite sure it did.
Mm-hmm.
It took me conservatively 2.5 years to get a working manuscript for book 1,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me a year to get a working manuscript for book 2, and it took me about 9 months to get a working manuscript for book 3. So there was a lot of stuff I was undoing.
Mm-hmm.
My first editor said to me, "Are you trying to be British?" And I have, sort of like, I grew up in a household where my mother spoke British English. She was Canadian, so I got rid of potato and tomato and either and neither and lieutenant and a few other things, but I didn't get rid of a lot of other things. Only when I started writing did I see things that I was completely blind to. And the American conventions, I was blind to, which is fascinating since I'm about as American as you can get. Um, it's been a big effort to Americanize what I thought was American speech, and to make it cleaner, make it more succinct, tighten it, make it, you know, a longer sentence that draws you in, and then a two-word sentence after that to snap it off, and that sort of thing. There is very conscious effort.
Oh, I think we lost Mr. Batwell. Not really sure what's happening, guys, but yep, let's just stay. Maybe we're just facing some technical. Mr. Batwell is just maybe facing some technical difficulties on her end.
Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
There we are.
Okay, yes. Hi, everyone. We're back. And yes, we have Mr. Boutwell.
you live in the hills and you get what you get.
Right, but that's totally fine, Mr. Boutwell. So yeah, here, to start with another session, we got something from Blue. He said that, has anyone told you that you look like John Malkovich, the actor When You Smile or Laugh?
Really?
Oh.
Well, that's a new one for me. Since I was 14, somebody has about once a month said I look like somebody else. And so it's sort of like my usual answer is no, I have the face this month. So this is my face because I've got it for another month.
Whoa, really? Now, here, going back to your book, Mr. Boutwell, as a writer of this book, can you share to us, your favorite part? We wanted to know. Yeah, we're very curious about that because this is a long series of books.
Asking a father about which of his children he likes the most. I the endings of each book are difficult to talk about because they still choke me up. And the ending of the third book chokes me up consistently. The Malila and Jesse and a plant. The idea that people are each other's best treatment. That one cannot do this alone, but can only do this in company with other people. And only those who, and there's a Jungian phrase called "only the wounded may heal," and that is the thread that goes through, I think, all the books, but is enunciated most clearly, and has a very factual meaning in the third book, is where Jesse is dying, and he heals this friend enemy of his from his youth, and the friend enemy heals Jesse, and one doesn't win, one doesn't lose.
Mm-hmm.
They both are healed.
Wow, see, that's amazing. And you know what, Mr. Boutwell, we also wanted to know, knowing that your book is again advocating a specific cause and agenda, what was an early, experience where you learned that language, that writing this book, creating this piece had power?
To that extent, I didn't. I mean, and I think that's the arrogance, the hubris of writers, is that you squirrel yourself away, shutting out everybody else, and type away, and you get to an ending point, and you have no idea whether it resonates with anybody, but you've got enough faith in what you've written. And how do I know? I read what I wrote, and I can't read it out loud.
Mhm.
It still grabs me emotionally. And so I think that if, um, my career has been in death and dying. Babies die all the time. To get, so I'm fairly hard boiled that way. That's kind of what I do. So to get me emotionally connected with something I wrote myself, I figure has got to have some currency with somebody else. And therefore, that's kind of the reason I believed that somebody else might want to write this. I was not intending to publish this when I first started. So,
Right. You know what? What's very one of the amazing things that we hear coming from you, Mr. Boutwell, is not just by being an author, but also connecting your experience you've had from the past by being a volunteered, physician. That is really such a good impact for many, let's say physicians out there, who's also having the ability to, let's say, engage a more diverse range of skills. The experience and knowledge, a very awesome thing, I would say, that would really, really provides you with a sense of purpose, right? Now, from that benefit you're getting from that profession, Mr. Batwell, are there any cons that you're also facing?
um, it, it takes, a lot of people are living from hand to mouth, whether they have a lot of money or a little bit of money.
Right.
I always considered that having enough money was allowed me to do this, um, that I wouldn't have been able to do had I been a street sweeper. So I'm obligated to do something with this money. And so I go on my own expense, and I don't have money when I'm coming, during the time that I'm gone. And it slows down my business after I come home. Um,
Mhm.
but you, inevitably, I consider this. I've gotten a huge amount from it compared to what mere money I had to spend doing it. And it's I enjoy it immensely.
Wow, I see that, Mr. Boutwell, and I must say that this situation, would really would also depend on your, let's say, circumstances, right? Volunteering could put really a strain on your, emotional, mental, and, let's say, physical health. From this thing
Yeah.
called, again, as what you have mentioned earlier, with the sacrifices that you've been through, long hours come with the, the territory that you also need to make. Somehow it can really be frustrating as well, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, medicine in a underdeveloped country, your standards are different. You're looking to do something, not necessarily fix the problem, because that may not be fixable. How many times do you have to treat malaria in the same person to understand that you're not going to fix the problem? Um, how many times do you know, um, try something and it's not going to work? You also don't know the outcome of many things.
Mhm.
So you try something and you may, you may treat the Burkitt's lymphoma and never know whether the child survives or not.
Mhm.
It's a very
Right.
treatable lymphoma, but you may not never know that. Whereas in American medicine, you almost always know what happens. I saw there was a comment about writing a series, which I'd like to
From JM, yes.
I,
How
I
can authors write series of stories? Isn't it overwhelming?
yeah, if you want a funny story, I did this thinking, oh well, this is going to be a short story, which was a long piece for me when I was writing this. Started writing this in 2013, um, and I blew by 70,000 words and said, maybe this is a book and not a short story. And so I kept writing, and it blew by 150,000 words. I said, maybe this isn't one book. And so I chopped it where I thought there was a good reason for ending it, and started, and that was Outland Exile. And I started writing Exiles Escape, and through a whole lot of interesting things. It really had a great time, and showing where Jesse came from in a lot of ways. And then blew by 120,000 words and said, "Oh, I've done it again." I was nowhere near finished, so I looked at a place where that might be stopped, and took another 40,000 words from that and did Malila of the Scorch and almost wrote it backwards. So this is where you're going to stop, and you're going to stop for sure this time because I'm writing it backwards. And had a lot of fun because I had set up the continuity for it, so there were less choices to be made than I had in a lot of other places. I'm writing a series now, conscientiously writing a series because I got trapped in continuities that I didn't necessarily want. Um, I had to write things in the second book and the third book because I had said them and published them in the first book. So I wanted to avoid that and be able to go back. The next series is I can is called the Silence and the Gods, to go back potentially and fix up mistakes in the first book that would allow me to write what I wanted to in the third book.
Mm. That sounds interesting, Mr. Batmill. And from that scene of both good and bad, let's say fate, and of course, survival and supremacy, right? Now, writing this book, Mr. Batwell, in general, what is the impact of writing this book to you and most importantly to your, let's say, loved ones?
Uh, well, in the last analysis, I failed. The one person that I wanted to appreciate it doesn't. My son has read them, and his politics have not changed to be more humane. And so you know, as far as my loved ones, I'm not doing very well. As far as somebody else, I, I write what I feel to be honest, and I can't write something else that I feel to be dishonest because the words don't come. So it's not like I have a choice. Is I've got to, what happens in here, it tends to be, in order to get the words out, the muse needs to agree with you. When you're in the real moment of creation, you're not really thinking. You sort of listening, and you're listening to put it down on paper.
Okay. And that being said, Mr. Batwell, from not having that support coming from your son, I know there's still a lot of, positive feedback that you got from your readers. Hearing a lot of positive
Yeah.
feedback from your fans, the supporters is already a good thing, right? And I know that everything is also worth it. And right now, Mr. Boutwell, we wanted you to know that these are also the things that keeps inspiring you, right? Now, what would you like your readers to, let's say, to feel after reading your book?
Wrung out. uh, And I want the emotional content to bring you out, to make you think that change is possible and that you've experienced. But I want you to think I want you to want more. But I want you
Mhm.
to be emotionally drained by following these characters because they have things to say that I think are worthwhile.
Right. And also, Mr. Boutwell, I wanted you to also take this opportunity to, let's say, give an advice, some writing tips that can help simplify the process of, let's say, our aspiring authors out there. So, yep.
Well, I've mentioned a couple of them. One is to keep writing. You can't edit nothing. You have to have
Hmm.
something written in order to edit it and decide it's terrible. It doesn't matter that it's good. It matters that you've written it, and then do your 500 or 350, or write for an
Hmm.
hour, or write for 500 hours, or whatever. But
Hmm.
do it daily. It needs to be a routine that is done and becomes part of your existence. And then once you've done that, once then you can start. Yeah, I love editing, surprisingly. Um, the editing process is the creative process. The whole thing about how do you make a statue? Well, you take a block of granite and you chip away everything that isn't the right stat in the right place. That's very much what you do in writing. You take the stuff that comes out of you and your id and your super ego, and you put it on paper and you make it work, and then you start making it art, and you
Hmm.
smooth down the high points and put in something that's funny and that sort of thing. But that's a process for another day. Every day, right?
Wow, that is a wonderful piece of advice, Mr. Boutwell. And you know what, Mr. Boutwell? Again, this is actually the thing that I really wanted to say to you right now. We wanted to say, a big thank you. You deserve this acknowledgement, this recognition by creating such a wonderful story. And of course, Mr. Boutwell, from the bottom of our hearts and my entire Readers Magnet family, thank you so much for choosing us to be part of this journey towards you reaching your goal as an author. And of course, not just that, by you advocating a specific cause in this book. It was an interesting discussion, Mr. Boutwell. Thank you so much for gracing with us today. So, yes, everyone, from the best selling author, our one and only, Mr. Clark Boutwell, author of the book Outland Exile, Exile's Escape, and Malilla of the Scorch. His book is available in Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and of course his website, that's www.oldmenandinfidels.com. And yes, you may also follow him on all the social media platform he has. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Boutwell. As we say it here in Reader's Magnet, we share your story with the world.
Thank you.